Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Architects Fast Forward webinar series. My name is Lillian, and I will be your moderator for today. Architects Fast Forward is a webinar series focused on the holistic perspective from the industry. Each session brings together collaboration from the industry with renowned architecture and building professionals, sharing their experiences from various perspectives, including industry, business, and education, to address current key issues and topics. In today's webinar, themed Digital Mindset and Policy in Architecture, we will discover the importance and cruciality of staying relevant by being adaptive to the ever-changing landscape due to the pandemic. Experts in today's session will share how policy making and shifting of the mindset towards digital is even more crucial now than ever before. With that, let me introduce the first speaker for today, Dr. Matt Benson. Dr. Matt, a trained geographer, is currently the Program Director of Think City, a specialized urban regeneration organization established by the Malaysian government's strategic investment arm, Khazanah Nasional. Over the past 20 years, Dr. Matt has been involved in more than 250 planning and development projects in suburban, brownfield, remote, and international settings. Hi, Dr. Matt. Over to you.
Hi, Lynn. Thanks, everybody, for your time. And thanks to Architects for inviting Think City and myself to be present this afternoon. So today I'll be talking to you, my topic is adaptive policy making and the future of space. Yeah, it sounds sort of cumbersome, but as I go through, I think you'll understand quite a different perspective on how we need to approach not just planning and architecture, but also our mindset when it comes to technology and space and society. I'll just start by, for those of you who don't know that much about Think City, we're more than 10 years old now. We're a social impact organisation that is owned or established by Khazanah Nasional, which is the Malaysian government's strategic investment arm. And we're funded through, several sources, but the main funders at the moment are Yasahan Khazanah, which is the trust of Khazanah and Khazanah itself. We started out in Georgetown and then with an experiment in revitalisation of the heritage site, moving a few years later to Kuala Lumpur, Butterworth, Johor Bahru, and a few little projects and interests in other places like Kuching and Ipoh. Our vision is to sort of take the knowledge that we've built in Malaysia and share that with the rest of the region. Over the course of 10 years, we believe we've had an economic impact of some nearly 1 billion ringgit, more than 700 projects. And the key for us is that every dollar that we spend, we get some level of co-investment. Our projects range from the public realm in Georgetown, in KL, in Butterworth, parks, investments in infrastructure, thinking about conservation, etc. We also have projects at a different scale, thinking about the network of cities and how they connect to one another through infrastructure and digitally and otherwise, and a range of environmental projects and demonstration projects is a big part of our approach. This includes in Penang work to look around climate adaptation work through nature-based solutions, an application of data to understand how cities are working and functioning. Recently, we've done quite a lot of work around the COVID-19 response, including advocating for national responses, thinking about using data to think about pollution and how that changed during lockdown, looking at technological apps to think about the delivery of aid in low-income household estates. So today, the presentation I will be providing is broken into 3 parts. The first and longest part is this idea of adaptive policy making. I'll then conclude with a short section on megatrends and scenario planning. That's to sort of get the audience to think about possible futures and possible drivers of Malaysian society and the economy into the future. And I'll just conclude with a very short few slides about the future of space. If I just start with this slide, I'm sure you've all seen this. Now, this is the starting point. This is why we went into lockdown. It was to flatten the curve, yeah? To flatten the curve, to get the peak of active COVID cases, the percentage that would require hospitalization under the line of the capacity of the health system so that it in itself could have time to scale up and figure out things, right? Because at the time there was a lot of unknowns, right? So the logical choice was to lock down for a period of some 40 odd days. But what we've seen is that after lockdown, this is around the world, with few exceptions, Malaysia being one of them, we've seen second waves, yeah? Malaysia hasn't quite seen a second wave, but it's sort of seen smaller outbreaks in different areas, yeah? These graphs here are active cases in different parts of the world, from Australia through to Hong Kong as the top middle. Across to the right is Vietnam. The bottom left is Israel. The center is France, and the bottom right is France. So you can see that there are different patterns throughout the different parts of the world. And actually, my daughter and I drew this diagram very early in the pandemic, and it was this idea that, this idea of flattening the curve was not realistic. Yeah, that at some point you had to lift the lockdown, there would be some increase in cases, yeah, except for a very few cases like New Zealand, yeah. But for the rest of the world, we're going to have to go through this process of lockdown and then partial lockdown and full lockdown, then open up again, then lockdown, yeah. So it's kind of a bit like a concertina, yeah. It's sort of this idea of moving in and out of different levels of mobility restriction, yeah. And we've seen this in the best example at the moment is Melbourne in Australia. Where I used to live, you were seeing lockdowns, then open up, and now we're seeing even more extreme lockdowns. Yeah. So what we actually see more likely to experience is this idea of flex. Yeah. This idea that the society is going to have to be able to adapt, to move around to different types of circumstances. This is the living with the COVID, yeah, type of mentality. Yeah. So we'll start to talk about what that might mean longer term, not just in terms of COVID, but actually in terms of just general crisis in overall. So it's particularly if we start thinking about climate crises, yeah. Around the world we have a range of crises coming our way with climate. So this sort of approach of being adaptable and flexible to crisis, this is the resilience side of things is important. Or in a place like Australia, maybe increase heat and fire. Or in other parts of the world, flood and tsunami and such things. But crisis has always been there, of course, but we're entering a period of increased intensity of crisis. Yeah? So we have to be able to flex, to be adaptable, right, to this sort of this sense of a future. Yeah. Now, at this point, quickly, is that what this really COVID has illustrated is the vulnerabilities of globalization. Yeah. This is not an external threat. This is actually what we call an externality to modern industrial society. Yeah. So it's sort of this awakening that we live in an age of crisis, and that we need to be able to flex and respond. Yeah? And hopefully, this crisis has given us some lessons moving forward. The other point I'd like to make here is that early on it was very easy to talk about this is a war, and that we need to have taken a war footing. You saw this in leaders around the world talk this particular language, male leaders anyway, Trump being one. But it's not a war as such, right? What we require, that language is used for mobilizing people, right? But really what we require is a system that is nimble and mobile, that can identify the threats fast and respond to them swiftly. Yeah. So if you're a big bureaucracy, you need to have feedback. Yeah. So technology is going to play a big important role in this. Big data is going to play a role in this. How do we get feedback into our system, right? So that we can take a culture of caution. This is also about what we call the listening approach. Yeah. So you can listen to what's happening in the ground and flex, change tact if necessary with new information as it comes forth. So we've been talking about this idea of reflexivity. Yeah, you can look this up. It's not a term that we've invented. It comes from a book in the 60s or 70s, I think it was, called The Risk Society. And it's got two meanings, and one's from sociology and one is from economics. And it has both a methodological and a philosophical dimension. And it's a really useful approach to be thinking about uncertainty and unknowns, yeah? Particularly when you sort of move through building new understandings, yeah, of situations. Yeah? So this idea that we have to be able to flex as new information comes to light. And we've seen that with the COVID crisis. Is an image from an architectural magazine somewhere. It sort of shows classrooms adapting, yeah, responding to the situation. We need to get back to school, but we're going to have perspex things in front of us, right? That's because there's some sense that you can acquire the disease through speaking or laughing or not just coughing. As new information comes to light, ventilation systems may change. The whole architectural world will start to respond to this during this period in which we have to learn to live with COVID until the vaccine, or at some point maybe, it disappears or becomes something more manageable. So these are the principles that we have put forth. Now, I've used this term reflexive city because we're an architectural forum here, so we need to be thinking about urban spaces, and it's something we'll be pushing forth more in the next few months. But we come up with 8 core principles about the reflexive city. Yeah? The first one is adaptive policy instruments, reflective leadership, communicant control, short circuits, critical supply chain perspective, makeshifting, regearing, and orbital synchronicity. Now I'll go through what these mean one by one before turning to the second topic. So this adaptive policy instruments, this is this idea of being able to manage risk, right? And thinking about learning, being an institution that learns to deal with uncertainty, yeah? So it means you need to listen to the ground. So in an architectural sense, or even in a digital world, what we do is we don't just sort of do the plan and build it. We investigate, we diagnose, we design, we pilot, we reassess, and we redesign. And this idea of an iterative process where new information comes to light, yeah, and then we start to reconfigure our thinking and our mentalities as we move forward. I'll just give an example, which is not a technological or digital example. It's actually an example of ours in a park in what's called Armenian Park in Georgetown. Yeah? So we started out with data, right? This is the park, this is how many people live within 400 meters, this is the land use, etc. This is the investigation. This is the sort of the diagnostic. The diagnostic being that there wasn't a lot of public open space in the area and that young families were moving out for various reasons. The park at that time was used as a flea market, interesting as it was. It was one of the few places in the area, the area had few public open spaces. So we needed to think about adding more additional amenity into the area. So we go through a process of engagement with traders, with the data, with wider community, designing a park, continuing even when we're building the park to communicate messages to the community, and then eventually delivering the park, activating it through different events, and even once finished, still going out and collecting more data to understand how the park is being used, yeah, and understanding what could be done better. So you can see this sort of ongoing process of listening and understanding about what's going on. So this diagram here just sort of explains this process of adaptive learning, institutional learning, from planning, gathering information, consultation, adapting plans, doing options, replanning, rethinking, make the justification, recalibrating, and once that has got to an endpoint, start to document the knowledge and share it. So just give you a bit of a clue of this type of approach. The second one is this reflective leadership. Yeah, this is this idea of dealing with complexity. Yeah, and being comfortable managing top down and bottom up. This sort of an institutional leadership process. And we've seen this with the COVID crisis. It's highly complicated, you know, with second and third order consequences that we couldn't have possibly imagined. Yeah? From the price of oil going to negative to clear skies over Kathmandu. Yeah. So these multiple interrelated factors, it's essential that in this modern age, in this age of crisis, that we can understand the complexity and the interrelationships. Here I've got this communicant control. This is the opposite of command and control. Huh? This is where we need to build trust with our local leaders and use that trust to bring about behavioural change. I think the most effective example of that is the New Zealand Prime Minister. Very, very good communication skills, did very, very well early to manage the pandemic. Well, I believe was the person who invented the idea of bubbles, or use that language to communicate to New Zealanders what the idea of staying in your bubble, making the bubble a bit bigger. And we're seeing that now with talk of travel bubbles. And I think it really originates from her. So this is an example of the communicate control method that is necessary in this age. The next one is what we call short circuits. This is the ability to change sudden directions. Yeah, we're going down a path. You need to be prepared to go into lockdown, to change tacks. So it basically means don't be too stubborn. Yeah, you need to have an ability to pivot, right? If things spiral out of control, as they could do. And in fact, the language finds itself into Singapore's approach to the pandemic. You know, they use the language of circuit breaker to justify and then that's what they did. They had the virus started to penetrate migrant communities and spiral out of control. So they did a circuit breaker to break that pattern of transmission. Critical supply chain perspective, this is reasonably easy to understand. It's just this idea that we need to make sure that we have redundancy in our supply chains. The whole idea of just in time may need to be revisited, because just in time doesn't work when it is proven to be vulnerable. This is the point here. So a little bit more self-sufficiency will be required. Technology and digital information will become important. Vertical farms we can expect to see more of to shorten those supply chains. Makeshifting is another idea that we've, not our idea, but we've incorporated into this framework. This is basically how do you use what's around you in a circumstance where you don't have supply chains readily open and working as efficiently as they might be. And this applies to everything from materials, but it could also apply to legislation and even apply in a digital world, coding. We can't get this thing now. How do we make shift? How do we do it a workaround? And we see example. This is an example of that, where I think this was Italian engineers used a 3D printing hack to turn scuba masks into ventilators. So just an example of makeshifting. Another one is regearing. This is the idea that our institutional, our assets may need to be rethought about and re-geared, and this will need to be experimental. So we see examples of hotels being repurposed into shared living experiences. I read the other day about Amazon in discussions about purchasing up downtown shopping malls to convert them into distribution warehouses for their products. That's a very different type of, that's what we call regearing, repurposing, adaptive reuse. Last one is what we call orbital synchronicity. Bit of jargon here, but it's playing with some concepts around, I guess, how do we actually how do we synchronize our individual orbits with one another, but also institutionally, right? Rather than being in a competitive environment, how do we be more collaborative, right? And sort of work off one another's strengths and weaknesses to deliver innovation. That's the idea here. And we've seen that happen in Zoom meetings and other sort of digital formats in the last few months. Certainly my experience has been, in some areas, extremely more collaborative with different institutions. There's a quote from the CEO of Microsoft who said that the last two months has seen 2 years of digital transformation. I guess MS Teams has been a big part of that and the scale up that has occurred. And I was introduced the other day to this idea of cloud kitchens. This is this idea that you can share kitchens to deliver food in smaller restaurants or outside in a safe manner. So it's sort of in a more resilient manner in a low risk environment. This is this idea of orbital synchronicity playing out again using digital concepts. So that's the end of the first section. The next two sections are a lot shorter, and I realize that I've probably only got 5 to 10 minutes more. So shouldn't take that long, and I'll go through these. What I want to talk about in this section is, I appreciate that it's a lot to take in, but I want to talk about 4 big trends that we need to be thinking about: geopolitical trends, technological trends, social trends, and urbanization. So the first one is these geopolitical drivers, and we need to be thinking in terms of China and the US. We need to be thinking in terms of globalization versus localization and regionalization. We need to be thinking in terms of political blocks and the devolution of powers to cities and states. And we need to be thinking about the reverse of offshoring, which is onshoring and backshoring. This is the idea that supply chains will change, and places like Malaysia may well win as a result of that. This is the idea of China plus one. So rather than relying on a single market to get your products, you have secondary, you have backups, you have redundancies in your supply chains. So this is a possible political driver and the extremes. Then we can talk about technology, and the big one being about automation and virtualization, right? Being limited in its realm of influence versus like the other extremes where it's unlimited. This has also have implications for surveillance and privacy, how we work from home versus how we work in offices, and also just the power of the big technology companies at the different extremes. This all has implications for social drivers, so everything from inequalities through to how long do physical distancing behaviours last. How long do we wear a mask for? How long do we try and keep a metre and a half apart from one another? These sorts of things, as there's going to be an important driver and there's uncertainty here. And the last couple are around jobs and the types of recreation that we engage into the future. The last set of drivers I'll point to is those of urbanisation versus counter-urbanisation. Counter-urbanisation is, we see it in Australia and Europe. This is this idea that people move from the big cities to second-tier cities. So you may see places like Ipoh or Alostar or Taiping or Malacca or Batu Pahat start to have increased population as people start to think about different ways of living. Also, this relates to the primacy of the big cities. So, is KL going to continue to grow? Or places like Penang and Johor and Ipoh and Malacca start to have a bit more, and Kuantan start to have a bit more strength and equality, spatial equality. Then there is, how do we manage the issues with the externalities of urbanization? What does that mean? Is how well do we get around congestion and pollution and flooding and overcrowding? How well do we manage these issues? And the last one there is, how does the post-COVID planning world look? Does it respond back to the same, or does it sort of continue along the current trajectory of different thinking about space and space use? So if we grab a couple of these and we put them on a vertical and put them on a horizontal, we can start to think about possible futures, for Malaysia in a post-COVID world, or even in a COVID world as opposed to a pre-COVID world. So we can think on the horizontal here. We can think about something that's very inward-looking with a regional focus versus a world which is very outward-looking with a global focus. That's on one extreme. So one is sort of more looking towards ASEAN, whereas one is more looking back towards a more globalized world connected with supply chains around the world. And then another one is where we've got here tech triumphs place versus place triumphs tech. These are the two extremes. So on the top there, you would end up with a world where it's all about technology, and you end up with all working from home, and place doesn't matter anymore. And at the bottom, we see this the other extreme, which is where the place triumphs over tech. Place still matters. And in these quadrants, we can describe 4 scenarios. And I won't go into the detail, but essentially you can talk about a world which is purely where the virtual is the main commodity. So places like Johor need to find its niche in a winner-takes-all world to compete with a place like Singapore. The strategic gateway one is where China's Belt and Road Initiative becomes continues to be important. So place matters. So a place like Johor or Penang or KL matters because it's on this Belt and Road. The local resilience scenario here is one where the impacts of COVID continue. Everything sort of not shrivels up, but sort of very much turns to the neighbourhood. Right, everything becomes, the supply chains become closer to home. The borders get harder, etc. And on the top there, we have this which we believe is the most plausible, which is that the world becomes a bit more regionally focused. So Malaysia sort of its place becomes more important in the Asia Pacific. So these are some that one needs to think about when it comes to technology in the digital world and the future of space. So I'll wrap up here. It's only a couple of slides. So all these sort of things that I've spoken about, from reflexivity through to adaptive policy, to thinking about the drivers of change, from geopolitical through to technological, through to social and urbanization and climate change, they're all going to change the way we think about the future of spaces. From the way that we think about the way that we look at a vacant building, to urban farming, to high density living. What is that really about? Is it appropriate? How do we do it? How do we segregate people? How do we manage outbreaks and disease? We'll be thinking a lot more about walkability and micro mobility tools as we get around the city in safer and more sustainable ways. Without question, the offices will be redesigned and rethought of, as will education institutes. Public transport will change. We'll be looking at different ways of using or of imagining what public transport is. We'll be thinking about the driverless car, maybe even the driverless vehicle or flying vehicles in the not so distant future. Yeah. So we also need to, as I put here, we need this agility to deal with this and be thinking about investments in smart cities. And importantly, I think that across the realm from institutions, diversification is going to become fundamental and important for resilience. That means diversification of technologies, diversification of income streams, and diversification of our local economies. And finally, the diversification of, I guess, the types of technologies and approaches to digitalization that we take and how that relates back to the use of space. That's my 30 minutes. Thank you very much. Lynn, back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Matt. That was what an insight. The 8 principles of the reflexive city is really extensive and insightful. Indeed, a lot to take in, I think.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Matt. Thank you so much. We will move on to the second speakers. Thank you so much, Dr. Matt. Right. Hi. Before we move on to Audrey, for those of you who are tuning in, and if you have a question for Dr. Matt, please send them in the live chat. We will pick it up and answer them in a while at the Q&A session. Let's move on to Miss Audrey. Hi, Audrey.
Hi. How are you?
Good. So a quick brief about Audrey. She's the CEO of Next Academy, the leading tech school for aspiring entrepreneurs and freelancers, software engineers, and digital marketeers. As a digital strategist, she helps companies to strategize on their digital footprint. And the session is over to you, Audrey.
Thank you. So hi, everyone. I'm Audrey. I'm with Next Academy. And Next Academy is a digital marketing and a coding school. So really quick brief of what we do. Right, so we started off as a coding bootcamp, the first coding bootcamp in Malaysia. Then we got into digital marketing. But the most exciting thing about Next Academy is that we see a lot of our students becoming digital marketers, entrepreneurs, technopreneurs. A lot of them are coders going out there building really cool stuff, AI or IoT and so on and so forth. And that really excites me. So when I was given this topic, right, digital mindset for the architecture and the design community, so I really sat down and thought about it, like what would be suited, what should we be talking about? And I think one of the key things is let's really just talk about the year 2020 itself. 2020 is really the year of change. I think when I put this picture out there, I believe everyone knows what this means. So many things have changed, right? What has changed? The way we communicate. During MCO, the way we held meetings and so on, we use Zoom. We use different sort of communication tools. The way we work, how do we collaboratively work together with everyone? When things are so different right now, you can't even, back in those days, be in the office, you can just, go out to someone and say, hey, I don't know how to do this, right? But right now with the whole MCO and working from home policy, things have changed. The way we conduct our daily lives and daily activities. So e-commerce has, went up tremendously. The way we get clients. Back in those days, you can still go door to door, company to company. But these days, how are you getting clients if you can't even get out of your house? And the way we showcase our business. I think for the architects as well as the design community, interior designing or in this space, what people usually do is that people will go to the showroom and just take a look at the showroom, take a look at all the models. But these days, things need to change. We can't showcase our space. We can't showcase our business in that way, especially when we can't get out of the house. So everything is happening online through the internet. And businesses needed to innovate and push the brand presence digitally, because if you're not doing that, what would happen to the business? And I think during this period of time, it is really a year of testing. You see a lot of businesses, some businesses are still trying to find their way in this digital world, but some businesses totally nailed it and grew tremendously during this time. So very often, off our head, the first thing that comes to your mind is that, hey, now I need to go digital. all I need to do is to have a website, right? So you build a website. But really, does having just a website cut it? The problem is this. When you build a website, I want you to imagine this. The World Wide Web is very big, very huge. It's just like the Sahara Desert. And when you build a website, yes, your website's there. But what you notice here is that in this Sahara Desert, there is no roads, there's no infrastructure towards your website. I think in the architecture community, when you think about building a city, building a town, very often what people would do is that whenever they want to build a new township, they will always build next to existing township so that there will be a spillover effect. But imagine yourself building a town in a totally new place where there is no other places around it. Very often you find it very hard to get people to come to the website. And I think this is the exact same analogy that you can imagine for this case, right? Your website, when you build a website in the World Wide Web, you put your house there, you put your township here, but hey, there's no roads, no infrastructure, and there's no spillover to get in there. And what you need to do is to find ways to build infrastructure towards your place. It's like building roads. For example, you have newspaper, you have emails, right? You send emails to people. You use social media to say that, hey, we exist, right? You may have ebooks out there. You may use different platforms. For example, in e-commerce, people often use things like Lazada, Carousel, Shopee to actually sell the products there, but also to bring awareness that they exist. Then you have things like Google Ads. Some of you may use influencers or Facebook ads. I mean, there are all sorts of ways to build, the infrastructure, the roads to your house in the middle of the desert. So we need to start thinking about the different aspects of digital marketing. And I think when I was talking to some of the businesses during this period of time, is what I realized is that a lot of people, this is their first foray into the digital, the digital world. And there are so many aspects of digital marketing, and very often people are not aware of it. So we're going to touch on some of these aspects. But really quickly, this is some of the key aspects of digital marketing, right? In the middle, you get to see this digital strategy. You have content, you have data analytics. I mean, everything needs to be powered by content. And everything you do, you want to get the data and analyze the data to see how you can improve, right? And here you have social media. All of this use Facebook, Instagram. That's LinkedIn, YouTube, and so on and so forth. Then the next one will be ads. You may be running paid ads. So for example, Facebook ads, Instagram ads. Some people run ads to get clients. Some people run ads to get awareness. And then you have something called SEO, search engine optimization, where you want to be able to rank as high as possible in Google. Then of course, you have your website, and very often people will be thinking, oh, is my website optimized? Is my website good? And next would be conversation marketing. How do you have word of mouth? How do you use chatbots? How do you use influencers, right, to assist conversations? Emails, and these days a lot of us are also using other messaging apps. For example, we're using Messenger, we're using WhatsApp, right, Telegram. We need to start thinking about all these things. And CRM, right? I think lead generation is one of the key things here. How do you generate leads so that they become your clients? And of course, mobile, and people are often on mobile. And, messaging is one of them, right? So one of the key things is when you are having a digital strategy, or you want to have a digital strategy, one of the most important thing is your goal. What is your goal? And I find that sometimes people often forget. People just go like, oh, I just need a website, right? But what exactly is your goal? Because when you're doing all your digital strategy, there is a lot of efforts that you need to put into it. And truth to be told, if you have no goal in mind, all these efforts, it's going to be like a rabbit hole. You're just going to continue working and working on it, and it's not going to be reaching whatever you want it to reach. So having a proper digital strategy requires you to put in a lot of effort, right? But what do you want to achieve by the end of the day? Is it purely awareness? I think some businesses may just want some awareness, but a lot of us would want to have leads, right? For more e-commerce related companies, they would want to have sales. So what is your goal exactly? Because different ways, different things that you see here may have very different strategy. So I'm just going to focus on a few things, right? I'm going to focus on social, SEO, content, and CRM. So let's get started. So content. What is content? I think content marketing is really key, right? You want to capture traffic through good content. So for example, this is from this F&B restaurant called Maria's Cafe. And I know her personally, and one of the things I really like is that she actually do videos on how to make the perfect steak, right? And people will just tune in there and watch these videos. For us, occasionally we will run like short digital marketing tips sort of videos, and that's what we share. And one of the key things is, I really like Gary Vaynerchuk. If you guys have not heard about him, hear him talking about the power of content, all of you should, right? Why do you use content for? You use content to educate people about what you do, to delight people, right? To showcase social proof by customers, people who are happy with your design or your houses. You want to put those things out because what people care about is, hey, has someone tried this? Is it good? Oh my goodness, it's really good, right? People want to see those things. And when you have good content, you have a chance for virality. And one of the key goals is you also want to aim for really long-term organic traffic, especially when you're doing blogs, for example. So as mentioned, the best preacher on the power of content, Gary Vaynerchuk, go check him out. So here are like some examples, right? I was just on Facebook, and interestingly enough, I came across this post. A few of my friends, I think about 3 or 4 of my friends, shared this post pretty much at the same time, and that's why I was just checking it out, right? So who has designed this house? What does it look like before and after? And people were sharing. People love these things. And look at this, 2.4K comments, 12K shares. And imagine this, on average, people will probably have around 500 friends. 12,000 shares means 12,000 times 500 worth of impressions, free impressions for people to see what you have done, right? And I believe all of you, especially in the architecture, the design space, you have a lot of all these amazing things to showcase. And if you're not showcasing it, you are definitely missing out. This is also another one which I got really excited. I saw this and I actually shared it as well. And the same thing, before and after. How this house looks like before and after, it looks amazing, right? People love these things. People love to be inspired because, owning a house, owning a beautiful house is always everyone's dream. So you can see, 1.6K comments and 9.4K shares. And not just that, because of this post, I actually clicked into her Instagram and followed her. So you can see that when you share when you have good content, people are very natural. People would naturally want to follow you as well. So now that we talk about content, the next thing is about social media. And very often you have your social media, Instagram, Facebook, and multiple platforms, YouTube and all. But what is it for? The reason why we do this is, one of the key things is to build credibility. We also want to build presence as people discover us. We use this platform to inform people of what we have, educate people as well, share the things, share the latest updates, right? We also want to use this to aim for viral content. And one of the most important thing is to interact with potential customers, and of course, gaining followers as well. So this was a really interesting example. This is also a friend of mine. So she actually decorated her house. And with just one post, this is her personal account, and with just one post, it went insane. You look at the shares, 7.1K shares. And after that, she got featured over and over again, right? And she got featured on multiple platforms. People interviewed her. And very interestingly enough, because of this, she actually found a new business. She actually started a new business out of this. So using social media, you can see the power of social media when you actually manage to get on to when you're sharing purposeful content that people love, people want, it would really build up a lot of runway for you, right, for the future. Here's another example, Malaysia Homey. So I think, like, especially in the space of architecture, in the space of design, what you want to do is to look for groups. Look for special pages. For example, Malaysia Homey is a page that's focused a lot on, you know, properties and so on. And what I realized is that when you go into this particular page, right, I don't know if you can see my Facebook, but if you look into this particular page, what you realize is that a lot of people are interacting with whatever they have. Look at their posts, right? 700 shares. You know, what's up? What about the next one, right? The next one, 192 shares. You know, what you can see is that there are Facebook pages, there are Facebook groups that you can actually work together with, because they are able to put forth your content out there to more people and to gain more attention and to gain more traffic for your business, for whatever you all are doing. And one of the key things to think about when it comes to the architecture and the design industry is that it's really, really visual, right? So if it's really visual, you want to take advantage of Instagram, for example. You want to be able to show them as many interesting, different aspects of the designs that you all have done. So another one that I was talking to friends, and when it comes to houses, whenever they need to get inspiration, and one of the key things is that they will look into things like Pinterest. And if you guys have not heard of it or have not had any of your footprint in there, you all should do that. So people would usually go and, just look interior design. They will actually look for a lot of ideas here. And one of the key aspects I want to show you is this, right? When you look at this, right, this person actually put up a piece of their content in here, and they have the website link here. People will go in, get inspired, and discover who these people are just by clicking on the website. So many people leverage on Pinterest to generate leads and traffic to their website. So look for similar platforms to put forth your brand. In fact, Pinterest has been one of the really key places for people to discover products, and eventually quite a lot of e-commerce websites uses Pinterest as well. And they find a lot of leads and traffics from this area as well. So for you, when it comes to design, architecture, you want to generate leads, this is one of those key places to look into. And recently, I've also been talking to some friends, understanding how people are selling houses or showcasing places during MCO or during circuit breaker in Singapore. So those are three things, right? They have virtual tours. Number one is the video walkthrough, 3D property tours, right? Video property tours, the video walkthrough. And they also live stream, right? They live stream the place, the event, and they talk about the place. And these things are being done, and people are buying houses. What people realize is that, especially during when people cannot do much, right? People start exploring the inspiration. People start looking into things that inspire them, and people start looking to things that they aspire to get. So inspire and aspire. So what they do here is you use these platforms to build a following, to build presence and awareness organically. At the same time, you get the chance to close sales as well. So use cases I've seen: online auction, educate on insurance, training, sharing, and of course, property tours, right? Virtual property tours, or how to use certain products. You get to see a lot of these things. So the next one is SEO. And I think, for people who don't really know what is SEO, really quick one would be that when you're Googling for something, you really want to be, appearing on the first page of the keywords that you've Googled, right? So for example, digital marketing course, you can see Next Academy on the first page. Find second-hand car, you can see car list on the first page. So the reason why we do SEO and we pay a lot of focus on it is because we want to generate long-term sustainable traffic. You probably noticed that on Facebook, the lifespan of your content is very short. So the moment the person see it, and then maybe a few days later, people don't really get to discover the post anymore, unless you share it nonstop. Another thing is also, like with Facebook or whatnot, Facebook, Instagram, you can always use paid advertising. It's no problem. But sometimes some people will just say that, is it even sustainable? So creating content is one of the ways to create sustainable organic traffic for you. These are like some of the key things to think about when you are creating content. So you want to make sure that your content is SEO optimized. You want to get link backs from credible sources, right? If there is any credible architecture sources out there, or design sources, design websites out there, try to get yourself featured on those websites and get them to link it back to your website. So there is also something called the technical on-site SEO configuration and localized SEO as well. One key thing is this: I think one of the key takeaways that you guys can think about is really understanding what people search for within your niche. Content to think about is, what do people search for when they're actively looking for an architect or a designer of sorts, right? Is there any complementary topics you can talk about? And what are some of the hot topics that you can relate to? So one of the key things is this, right? For example, 29 modernistic designs for your house, right? That could be one of the articles that you can put forth. 10 ways to keep your house cool without aircon during this time. I think during this whole MCO period, and the circuit breaker period, a lot of people were really concerned with the electricity bills. Maybe this is one of those content that you can talk about, right? In the future, when people are building houses or looking for very smart designs, what can you do about it? How to change your house into a smart home. So one of the key things you guys could look into would be Google Trends. Go to Google Trends and try to put in keywords to see what are the interests over this period of time. So Google Trends will be one of the key ways to look and explore topics that you could eventually write about. So the next one is localized SEO. I think all of you need to have your Google My Business set up properly. And for me, I think there are a lot of good opportunities in this area, because I was just Googling, trying to find keywords like architects in whatever countries and so on, and I find that there are still a lot of space for people to dominate certain keywords. Really, a lot of opportunities there right now. So if you have not done this, please get started. And these are some of the key ways for people to discover you. And finally, we talk about CRM. I know I'm running out of time, but I think another 5 more minutes is fine, right? So we're going to be talking about lead generation. And you want to generate leads. You want to attract leads. Basically, you want to have a magnet that can bring people in, right? So ultimately, the reason why 99% of the people want to have a strong digital presence is because they want their efforts to get more leads and more clients. The keyword is this: leads and clients. So I want you guys just to imagine a rabbit with a carrot. How to lure a rabbit. So imagine yourself trying to get a rabbit to jump into your arms, right? But the key thing is, a wild rabbit won't happily just walk into your embrace, right? So what you need to do is to entice it with something that they like. And every little action it takes it one step closer to you. And ultimately, when the rabbit is close enough, you can just, hold on to the rabbit. So we use this term called lead magnet. So a magnet that attracts leads. And the few ways we do it is, the reason why I do it is to capture interest and to capture micro actions. So for example, some of the courses might be more expensive. Hey, we can offer a low price course, so that a low cost mini offering, so that people can find out about us. And eventually, they try it out and they love it, and they will decide to take on the bigger products or the bigger services that we have. So what we see is we often see people giving free items, low cost mini offerings, previews, test runs, free consultations, and so on and so forth. So this is also a very interesting thing. Dentists, like if you don't want to get braces, right? So if you want to get braces, and one of the ways that this particular company is called Become attracts people is that they will always have a very small, kit. And the kit is only $129. And it says that, hey, why don't you order a small kit and test out to see, how your teeth is aligned, how can we fix your teeth? And then after that, only you decide if you want to pay $6,000 for it. So those are one of the ways, right? A micro action that can eventually lead to a macro action. Another way that I've recently thought that this was really, really interesting. So it was this, it's called Pot Glasses. This company, they were trying to, they were really impacted by the circuit breaker and the MCO. And people are not able to go to their store to try on glasses, to buy glasses. So what they did is that they came up with this really interesting idea. It's called Try On, where you can try on virtual glasses. So virtually trying on the glasses to see if it suits you. So these are what we call lead magnet. And when you're interested in it, you're going to give the information to them, and eventually they're able to reach out to you and upsell to you. So this is another example, a really quick one. So very often, when you're out there, you probably would get some ebooks. So hey, if you want to get an ebook, right, click on it, and they will ask you want to download these examples, give me all this information. So this is one of the very key examples of how they get leads. So I think, there are a lot more. We don't have all the time to cover everything. But one of the key things, to think about is that it's always about funnel marketing. We want to build a funnel, right? Because ultimately you attract 1,000 people, maybe, out of 1,000 people, 10 people will convert into your customer. So you need to understand the customer journey. You want to align your entire team, find potential gaps and leakages in this funnel. Right? Very often, all the things that you have, the 8 things plus this big little digital strategy here, everything comes in to work together when you're building this funnel, right? You need to understand where, different parts of your strategy is going to require different parts of digital marketing. And this is how you get everything to work together. When you're becoming more and more established, you want to be able to create a funnel, a sales funnel, so that in the future, it just runs automatically for you and your business in generating leads and converting people into your customers. So I think that's it for now. That's all I have. I'm just going to give back to this session back to Lillian, and I'm going to take any questions that you guys have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Audrey. I hope you guys had fun listening to Audrey. We'll go into a question and answer session in a while. As we bring back on Dr. Matt, and maybe perhaps we can have a quick. We have about 5 minutes. Yes, a little overrun. We apologize for that, but just another 5 to 10 minutes to take some questions. Okay. If anyone has any question, you can ask in the session in the chat now while we go into some of the questions being asked first. There is one question that is addressed to the both of you. The question sounds like this: what are the best advice for the audience to adopt or adapt from in times like this, of course, be it in changing policies or digital strategies to take for their business? Maybe Dr. Matt can share with us.
Sure. What I think in principle, what companies have to do is what we call use this word pivot, right? Have to think about the new normal.
Yeah.
I think Audrey pointed this. Some businesses have done well. Where there's crisis, there's also opportunity. So I think that's the first point. Just because there are crises, it's not the end of the world. Yes, it's certainly difficult for some businesses without question, but I think it's probably the simplest answer is look for the opportunity that is out there. Look for your own skill sets and knowledge bank, and see how that knowledge can be applied to those new opportunities.
That's good. What about you, Audrey?
I think really similarly, pivoting is one thing. Always remember that when it comes to the digital strategy, your key products really matters as well. So one of the key things is that sometimes I see in the business with some companies is that people rely heavily on digital marketing. They think that digital marketing is ultimately the answer, but before that, take a step back, really understand your business fundamentals, because digital marketing, it's like an oil, right? You need to have a fire when you put the oil, and it becomes really, really, and the fire grows really, really well and really big, right? But if there is no spark in the first place, you need to figure out what is that spark first. If there is no spark and you keep on, pouring oil, I think you get what I mean. You just get a really oily puddle of, a puddle of oil, and that's it, right? And no fire.
True.
So,
That's true. Okay. Dr. Matt, could you probably share more? I have a question here that would like to ask more about the 4 possible futures for Malaysia that you showed earlier, which is the post-COVID slide. I think
Yes.
they would like to know what are the areas that are within their control, and how big is the beyond control area.
Yeah.
They'd like to know more about that.
No, it's a very good question, and I think the way I presented this is that a lot of it's outside the control of an individual, right? These are the circumstances that will unfold in time. That's sort of how I position those 4 scenarios. And the reason we position, but at a state government level or a federal government, yes, we can start to shape some of these things, right, through policies, etc. So, and certainly we can collectively, these futures are shaped by our collective actions as well. If we decide to go down close our borders and look insular and just don't leave our taman, right? That's it's our behaviours that shape that. So it's not entirely out of our hands, but I think a lot of the big shifts are out. So really, it's down to individuals. How do you, if these are the likely futures, what are the opportunities for us inside that? And I think in the more plausible future, which I think is the more regional approach, relying on these long supply chains, it goes to a more something in a balance, sort of looks to the region.
Something more digital.
Yeah, digital, yes, but also I think I think we'll find a balance. We'll find a sweet spot. I don't think we're all going to be working at home the rest of our lives.
All the time, yes.
I think maybe that I imagine I'm interested to hear what Audrey says on this, but I imagine that it's accelerated the remote working trend, but it's not going to replace the office. And maybe you have an office that's working at 80% capacity or 60% capacity, depending on your business. But I don't think there's any. I don't believe it's the end of the office at all.
True. Audrey, you want to weigh in on this? How the future of Malaysia is going to be like, since we're on this topic?
I don't think office is going to end as well, but I think there will be definitely a lot more work from home sort of arrangement with people. How many days, maybe 2 days at home, maybe 3 days in the office, and all spread out, people coming in at different timing. So I know a lot of companies doing like team A, team B rotation. Yeah,
that's true. Okay, Audrey, there's a question for you from one of our audience. Let me just get to it. The question goes like this. Some people said virtual tour or VR will cost much more than as compared to physical exhibition, as we are still talking on the Archidex platform. How can it be more cost efficient, or how digital marketing can help?
I really think, VR, I believe that's definitely going to be more expensive, but virtual tours, right? Literally having people walking into the house, make sure the lightings are good, walking into the house and showcasing the area. A lot of people are actually doing that, right? Just walking to a house, describing how the house is like on the outside, what they love about it, walking to each rooms and, talking about the rooms and so on. So I think those things, a lot of people are doing it. A lot of property agents are doing it. And I think that is something that can be adopted, right? And sometimes what people do is that people will also do so-called tours. I know that sometimes with architects, you don't have the exact place already, but you have the blueprints, right? And they render into really nice blueprints, showing people how things are like, talking about, the benefits of, of certain parts of this, let's say this design. I really think that there is this space that a lot of people have not even ventured into yet. And very often it's the property agents who talk about the houses, but I've never really truly seen architects or designers per se doing this sort of introduction. So maybe it's something for you to start exploring. And I don't think it's going to take a lot of money because these are existing assets you have. But the question is just more on delivery. So the more you actually show, all these things, people actually see you as an authority leader. And this is actually, all these things are all related to digital marketing, right? It's all digital efforts to market yourself.
Okay, that's true. Okay, let's see if we have any more questions. I have one more for Audrey as well. Audrey,
Yep.
a quick one. The question goes like, if I have a multilingual content, English or Mandarin, on one website, will there be a problem to get approval in AdSense? And will there be any problem in SEO or ranking standpoint? Any suggestion for multilingual content website in SEO?
It really depends on the website that you're using. Very often, existing websites like WordPress, for example, they actually do have this multilingual plugins that are made available to you. And what happens is very often is this content can appear in, let's just say, 2 different languages or 3 different languages: English, Malay, Chinese, right? And they will actually you can set it up in a way where if they detect that you are in a certain country, please present this language. For example, if you look at Facebook, which sometimes is really annoying, like because they detect that you're in Malaysia, everything becomes Malay, right? So those things are made very possible with SEO. They can also detect, if I'm not mistaken, they can detect your browser language as well. So assuming your browser language is Chinese, right? So you would actually be served a Chinese when you click on the link, you will actually be served a Chinese content as opposed to an English or Malay content. All these plugins are available. But it really depends on which platform that you're using.
Okay, understand. That's good. Okay, before we end for today's session, any final words from Dr. Matt?
Final words from me. Well, I think it's probably the word I would say is that it is a new world. I think Audrey said it nicely when 2020 is the year of change. But I know it's a bit hard at the moment to think optimistic, but I do have quite often. I think it'll be the crisis that brings about the positive change. That's my final word.
Okay, and Audrey?
I think I'm really excited to see a lot of content coming out from the architecture as well as the design community, because I don't see that enough, right? I really, really don't see that enough. And I'm really excited to see more content from you guys.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, both speakers. That's all the time that we have for today. Thank you, Dr. Matt. Thank you, Audrey. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time today. We would now like to take, if you can help us to do a quick and short survey. The link will appear at the chat, in the live chat now, and you can just click on it and just answer 2 simple questions. And we really look forward to seeing all of you again. Thank you so much, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Ian. Bye.
Bye-bye.